Thank you guys very much, Chair Taylor, members of the CSAC committee. My name is Martin Creethy. I'm the Director of System-Wide Accessibility for Capital Metro. So I manage all of Capital Metro's ADA and accessibility efforts, as well as support the ATP as a subject matter expert on matters of accessibility. Today I'm presenting on system-wide accessibility and urban design. This was a presentation we gave to the board and to access. Um, and at the board, it was with Peter Mullen, but uh, Jackie has graciously agreed to help me out with the latter portions of the presentation. So I appreciate that. Um, from the onset, before we actually get going with the slides, I just want to say the purpose of presenting this to both the Cap Metro and it will be presented to the ATP board is to give a is to give a better sense of how accessibility is being approached from the perspective of design, particularly on the Project Connect side with all the programming, as well as on the Capital Metro side, that accessibility is something that we're considering as a first principle, that it's something that is paramount in whatever projects we're working on, and that it's something that we focus on from the onset. So we can get ourselves going here. All right. If you'll go to slide 2 for me, Edna. All right. ADA and accessibility. So, what is the Americans with Disabilities Act? It is civil rights legislation. It's an extension of the civil rights pieces of legislation of the 60s and 70s, except in this case, it extends civil rights protections to individuals with disabilities. In the transportation realm, it guarantees equal access to transportation for people with disabilities. And if you're looking at the slide deck here, you see PWD in parentheses. It's just a way to sort of shorten that for the purposes of slides. Creates a framework for regulations and standards to ensure that people with disabilities have access to both transportation and transportation facilities. Next slide, please. Um, Drilling down a little bit further to what is accessibility. Accessibility is the degree to which a facility, practice, program, service, or technology is available to persons with disabilities. For something to be accessible in the area of facilities, that's something that is readily usable to individuals with disabilities. So it has the requisite accessibility features that a facility needs for persons of all functional abilities. Program or practice is accessible to the extent that people with disabilities can participate in those activities in full. Technology, when we talk about accessibility, is the extent to which a person with a disability can use that technology with or without the use of assistive technology. Next slide, please. System-wide accessibility, which is sort of something we've moved towards in the last, I'd say, probably a year or so, is taking more of a coordinated effort to improving accessibility across the entire Capital Metro network. So it's not looking at just one piece in isolation, but how all the pieces kind of fit together in a coordinated way. Whether that's facilities that be it our transit stops or our stations, our vehicles, both Metro Bus, Metro Rapid, and our future light rail vehicles, technology, including our customer information systems and any of our internal systems. Moving on to the next slide here. Let's just take a little bit of time here on facilities. So when we talk about the facilities, we're talking about the built environment, and that's where the pedestrian meets the infrastructure. And it's important to incorporate accessibility at concept and design. So when you're going to build out any of the things we're going to discuss, um, it's critical that accessibility be something that's dealt with on the forefront because it's very difficult to often retrofit and go back and try to readdress things. Can include pedestrian features such as sidewalks, shared use paths, traffic signals and crossings. And in regards to Capital Metro's own buildings and facilities, our facilities are readily usable and accessible to people with disabilities. And they're accessible to the public, and we're able to host public meetings um, or that are open to all manner of individuals. So drilling down a little bit further on facilities, sidewalks are critical because access to transit begins and ends with a sidewalk. Um, you need to make sure those sidewalks are ADA compliant, they have the appropriate widths, and most importantly, that you have sidewalk connectivity. So, one strip of sidewalk in isolation is not enough. You really need to look at sidewalks as something that's a connected network. Curb cuts. I have this on here because, believe it or not, back in the day, curb cuts were taken for granted, but they're important. We need those curb cuts, especially the detectable warning strips adjacent to the roadway that alert individuals that they are moving from one mode into another, or one type of facility to another. Looking at shared use paths, the means of transportation and a space that could be shared by persons with disabilities, folks who are ambulatory, cyclists, and folks using other types of wheeled mobility devices. Um, and these are important if we're trying to build out multimodal facilities as we are with our Project Connect projects to ensure we have all those pieces together. But you you need the sufficient right of way in order to make sure that you have ped and bike facilities, whether they're adjacent to each other or co-located, that really minimize safety and promote accessibility, because you don't want to see conflicts between, say, individuals who are on bikes and those who are perhaps in wheelchairs or may be visually impaired. Traffic signals is another important piece. Um, Audible pedestrian signals, I'm sure y'all are familiar with those. Those are the walk signals, except in this case, they are audible. They're really a form of effective communication for folks with disabilities, particularly those who are low vision or blind. Because if you're standing at a street corner, um, an individual who has vision can obviously watch when the light turns from red to green, but someone who's blind or low vision may not have that ability. And so these audible pedestrian signals really speak to um, another portion of the ADA that deals with effective communication. Um, there's a couple of other types of signals out there that are also important, some of which we will see in um, some of our Metro Rapid planning, and that's rectangular rapid flashing beacons. These are sort of serve as a yield sign um, to drivers uh, that pedestrians are looking to cross the stretch of road. And then the pedestrian hybrid beacon, the PHB, which is sort of the gold standard of traffic signals for pedestrian safety. You push their push button activated and they stop traffic. Next slide, please. Looking at our vehicles, um, you know, our light rail or our metro bus vehicles, um, all of our vehicles on the fixed route side are 100% accessible. We were the first transit agency in Texas to go 100%, and the third in the country. And we incorporate all the necessary accessibility features in our vehicles, um, such as ramps and audible announcements, lifts for our express buses, securement systems. With our new electric vehicles, we are featuring the Quantum system, which is a reverse facing, a rear facing securement system that can be utilized without the involvement of the operator. Um, and then on our commuter rail and on our light rail, we will have level boarding rail platforms. It's important to be intentional about design when we're looking at these vehicles as part of the procurement processes when we um, I've been purchasing vehicles over the last 10 or 11 years that I've been with the agency. I participate in each one of those to ensure that we've got all the right features exactly the way that we want them for our local community. Because we go out, we have a couple of organizations that we work with when we're trying to spec a vehicle. So we might take a bus out and try a couple of different options in order to get some feedback on what the public actually wants, you know, in particular to things like securements. And then once you get that feedback, you want to design a responsive scope, something that we do, like I said, on the fixed route side, and that'll be something that would be important going forward as we do that on the light rail vehicle side. Next slide, please. So technology is another important piece. Quite honestly, technology is the type of thing that can break down barriers and sort of eliminate some of the existing challenges that people may experience, whether it's those that deal with the built environment or others. Um, but there are customer information systems out there that can really improve the journey. Mobile apps and technologies that can provide information, as I said, about the built environment, wayfinding and navigation, especially if a person is low vision or blind and um, cannot see signage, and particularly about information about the built environment. How can you provide information to individuals in wheelchairs about what they might encounter as they're trying to traverse a journey? And that just gives people a sense of ease and confidence in using our system, and that's what we want people to have. Um, Next slide, please. However, regardless of all the things that we try to improve and focus on from an accessibility perspective, whether it's vehicles, facilities, the technology, there will still be individuals in our community who will not be able to use our fixed modes based because they have a disability, and in combination with how they function with that disability, they're not able to. And so recognizing that, obviously we have the Metro Access program that serves as a safety net to individuals with disabilities who aren't able to use those modes. And it'll continue to remain a critical piece of our overall portfolio for people with disabilities to make sure that they have transit access that is commensurate to their abilities. Next slide. Talk a little bit about partnerships and community engagement. Here you got a list of our technical partners. Um, sure you guys are well aware that we've worked with a number of different entities in coordinated ways. So, City of Boston Public Works, they were a big part of some of the work that we did in our bus stop accessibility program, improving bus stops across the board. ATD, big partner on our Metro Rapid projects. Vision Zero, I actually am housed in the safety department. So my boss and our group, we do work with the Vision Zero team. And then Travis County and TxDOT and the other entities who have uh, an interest in what we are doing. And it's important to leverage these partners and partnerships in order to maximize safety and accessibility. Then we have our community stakeholder groups. Among them is your um, the other committee, your counterpart committee, the Access Committee, where we meet with them monthly, much as you guys do here, and we get information and take recommendations. Adaptive Texas, which is a grassroots disability advocacy organization. We meet quarterly with them. They're really a big source of input for us. The Chris Cole Center for the Blind, that is a training facility for people who are blind or low vision. And it's an excellent source of input as regards that population. And then the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, which is the oldest advocacy organization for people with disabilities in the state. And we do this in order to maintain a feedback loop to share and then incorporate ideas that we hear about. Next slide, please. All of this is to say that looking forward in the future, what could a system-wide accessible transit system look like? We could see full accessible paths of travel across the built environment to transit facilities with accessibility features, vehicles that are designed for the future with all functional abilities under consideration and operating with precision technology. And then perhaps my fave is customer information systems that can provide universal access to improve the to improve the journey and help people complete their trips at every step of the way. And at this point, I'm going to intro Jackie, whom I'm sure you all know well, to kind of talk a little bit about how this is all sort of coming together in the work that we're doing on the Project Connect side.
Thanks, Martin. Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Jackie Nierenberg. So we've had a number of community design workshops at which accessibility has been the focus of our conversations. And all of this is to develop a system that is accessible to all, that has vehicles that are designed for the future and for all functional abilities. As when we design for the folks who need the greatest access, we design for everyone. Customer information systems and apps that facilitate universal access to complete the journey with information at every step. So just making the experience as easy and accessible to all as possible. Next slide, please. So the first community design workshop we had, and these are an extension of something we've developed called working groups, which are geographically specific working groups along each section of the Project Connect light rail corridors. So this was part of the Blue Line working group, and some of you may have actually participated. This was for the Pleasant Valley Riverside Transit Plaza, in which we were exploring a couple of design options for how we connect people to the Metro Rapid service from the Blue Line and vice versa, because both will be convening at that nexus. And so option one is explored a landscaped bridge and Pleasant Valley Road being above the transit way, with Metro Rapid stops located north of East Riverside Drive, and through traffic that remained on Pleasant Valley. And then option two was the at-grade Transit Plaza option, which meant that the Blue Line, the light rail line, would be operating on the street level, and the Metro Rapid Transit Plaza would be on East Riverside Drive, with Pleasant Valley through traffic diverted via sort of an elongated roundabout loop. We got a lot of very interesting feedback on access there, and most of it had to do with the length of time it would take to use option two versus option one. And then with option one, we got a lot of feedback from folks that how people would get underneath to access the Blue Line, and would there be elevators, for example, involved in escalators, and the problems associated with each of those. So a lot of interesting feedback, a lot of diversity of opinions, and both options are being reviewed based on the input we received. And then the next slide shows us the next community design workshop that we held, which was for the North Lamar Transit Center. Again, this is like a nexus of a lot of services coming together in one place and trying to figure out how to make the experience between these services easy and a pleasant experience, and above all, a safe experience for people. So we had a couple of options there. Also, one was to create a pedestrian bridge at the midpoint of the rail station, which would be on North Lamar, and connect with the North Lamar Transit Center via that pedestrian bridge. Option two was the pedestrian bridge to North Lamar Boulevard. Option two was to take folks all the way down to the intersection of North Lamar near 183 and then bring them back around to the platform. Most of the input we received there on accessibility was that the pedestrian bridge was preferable because of just the length of the crossing of the getting to that crosswalk, and also just the fact that North Lamar is such a crazy busy street, and that intersection just doesn't feel safe for people. So just some examples of the feedback we received there that will feed into how we make decisions based on accessibility.
So you mean option one was preferred?
Actually, option one was preferred by most. So yeah, I mean, we actually, it was interesting because we did one that was a virtual event. We didn't get as many people as we would have liked. I think we had like 41 people participate. So we went out to the North Lamar Transit Center and talked to folks right there who were using the bus services. And in that case, that's when option two really began to shine. Excuse me, option one really began to shine, because when they actually looked at it on the ground, and this is the value of being in person at a place, right? Because people could actually see it and kind of experience it with their eyes. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to do as much of that the last year and a half as we'd like, but we're learning safe ways to do that kind of at stop outreach. And so that's when the first option really rose to the top. But again, both options are still being looked at. And then finally, I think we had one more, if we want to go to the next slide. Yep. This was the drag, another hairy situation. And so we did this amazing workshop. This one was between variants, and we were able to do it in person at UT. Some of you may have attended this. We had a huge attendance for that one. Not only students and faculty and staff, but also community members who showed up, business owners, etc. Lots of people, obviously, lots of stakeholders interested in what's going to happen in the drag. It's a super constrained area. And we talked about two design options. One was to include both traffic bus lanes in addition to the light rail and try to fit everything in to that one space. The other one was to remove vehicular traffic and make it more of a transit mall. And so we had a lot of good input. It's interesting, students really liked the transit mall option. I think that they saw it as a safer way for them to access the university, the West Mall. We had a variety of opinions from staff and community members who were there. Obviously, business owners were concerned. How does this impact their business? So there's a lot to be considered here. And again, there's no decision that has been made. We're taking these both forward to 30% design, but some really good input on what people consider to be safe. And then finally, I think we have one more slide. Oh, I think the last slide just shows the renderings of what those options could look like. So we were able to show those and give people a better idea of what we were talking about when we moved to the transit mall option versus including the vehicular traffic.
And Jackie, if I may add, on the transit mall, and really with these different meetings that we had, safety, of course, is paramount. But with the transit mall, you get so much additional space. So we hear from people with accessibility needs that, you can provide more space for pedestrian access, going back to the multimodal facilities and shared use paths. With that kind of space, you minimize conflicts that might exist between, say, cyclists or folks with any manner of disabilities. When you're looking at, absolutely, and when you're looking at the bridge, whether it's the North Lamar piece or the discussion we had at Riverside, we had a lot of comments about elevators and, are there alternatives to elevators? Just because of all the issues that we have with those, and just ways for folks in wheelchairs, whether power or manual, to get down and through those things. So we've been fortunate to have some really good drill down sessions, and some very specific to just accessibility. And we continue to hope to do that, where we're getting some specific feedback on the accessibility for members of the accessibility community who, who walk, wheel, and cane through these environments.
Absolutely. And
That,
again, I mean, if we design for the most access, then everybody wins, right? So agree.
questions?
Go ahead, David Foster.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very interesting. Great presentation. Just a side note, I hope, and I'm sure you're hearing from the bike community too about the drag, the options there. Great.
Oh, yes, we've heard a lot from the bike community on all of these. We get a really good representation from the bike community.
Good to know. But on the accessibility issue and sidewalks, one of the questions I've always had, and it's kind of a big question, I'm not sure that you can answer it here, is where does the city's responsibility begin and end versus Cap Metro's when you have sidewalks, from a neighborhood towards a transit stop? How does that work? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so that's a really complicated question. Go ahead, Martin. Go ahead.
I actually can, and it is. And in a lot of ways, it's the importance of a partnership. So if we put down a stop, we have an agreement goes way back, well before my time, with the city that in agreement we can use their right of way. So if we lay down a stop and there's not a sidewalk, our responsibility is to ensure that there's connectivity to the nearest corner. So we can't just place a stop down in isolation and not provide a sidewalk facility to the nearest corner. In order to get the larger connectivity along a corridor, well, it's the city's right of way, so we have to work together. So going back a couple of years ago when we did the bus stop accessibility program, whatever mechanisms they use, I think it was an ILA, that was important because we needed to make upgrades to our bus stops to get them to another level of compliance. And the city worked in tandem with us in order to work in the same corridors that we would be in so that they can kind of follow and work through the connectivity with us together. But if we put down a stop or we go to improve a stop at a certain level, there's a trigger that requires that we provide some connectivity as Capital Metro, but the broader network is the responsibility of the city. Does that help?
It does. And so on the side of the street where there's a stop, you'd have to have a sidewalk on that side of the street to each nearest corner, I guess.
Yeah, if we put in one, we got to go to the nearest corner. We have to have some. Yeah. So the idea would be.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Say that to the other side.
Both sides
to the other side. Both sides would be the same. Where you have a stop, like here and here, you've got to have connectivity to the nearest corners in both directions.
Don't have to go both directions.
Or just the closest corner.
The closest corner.
Yeah,
right.
to the closest corner.
Right.
And the idea being, if you put down a stop and a bus serves that area, you deploy a ramp. Well, then what now? Because now you've placed someone on an island.
Right.
And particularly someone in a wheelchair, and you can't do that. So you have to provide some level of connectivity, and that's what's required.
And what about crosswalks and pedestrian beacons and the like? Same thing. If it's Cap Metro stop, Cap Metro has to provide that across the street of a certain size.
That gets a little more complicated because, like I said, we don't do all of those pieces. But I think wherever those kinds of things are needed nowadays for the purposes of safety and so forth, we have a level of coordination with the city where we can work through some of those things in tandem together. So I wouldn't say like it's this one's responsibility versus those, but when we're planning to put down stops, the city and ATD and all of our partners are well aware of our intent, and then we work through that together to make sure that we're meeting both Cap Metro and the city's goals, whatever those may be in regards to transportation access and safety.
Great, thank you.
Any others? hadn't been here in a long time. It's been years. So if you got something that you've like, I never wondered how that worked. At your disposal.
I'd just like to say that I really appreciate that y'all are doing outreach at site-specific locations. I think going out and getting feedback from people at North Lamar Transit Center and on Guadalupe across from UT and 40 Acres is, you know, to my mind, that's kind of critical input. I know I've been to a couple of the open houses virtually, and the experience is a little bit different. I think
Yes.
for me, partially because I'm a bit more aware of the system as a whole, as someone who's somewhat involved with Cap Metro. But I also kind of wonder how much of the feedback is, you know, not necessarily people that are using that portion of the infrastructure daily or weekly, or may not be as aware of, you know, the concerns with those locations.
Exactly.
So I really appreciate that y'all have found ways to engage at those sites in person and get direct feedback. I think that's pretty critical and certainly a challenge, and has been a challenge for the past couple of years. So I'm really glad to hear that.
And that option B that's sitting right in front of us, I think there's a lot of confusion about what that transit mall means in terms of, could it be only the light rail without the buses, or, and I think it's just not worked out, but there's the meeting tomorrow, and I think staff should be aware that I think there'll be questions about that transit mall option if it doesn't even include buses, especially.
As I understand it, the transit way will be designed to accommodate buses so that we have both options.
Right. But at some point there needs to be a decision.
Right, yes, and it hasn't been made yet. Good point.
Exactly.
Yeah, it comes up a lot.
Yeah, because it's a huge change.
Of course. There's a lot of people who use that bus service, so it's a complicated puzzle, man. It really is. Challenge.
Yeah.
All right, do we have any more questions regarding system accessibility? I'm going to take that as a no. All right. With that, Martin, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the update. I think we will move on to the Project Connect overview, which
All right.
that's you,
That's
Jackie.
me. And I think I'll share my screen. Oh, where's my little share screen deal?
Yeah, I think I stopped sharing my screen, so you should be good to go. So let me know if you have issues.
Oh,
or if
there
you
it is. I see it. Sorry.
Okay.
Was on Zoom earlier today, and it messes with me. Okay. There we go. All right. So I'm here to give you all the latest. Other grants could flow in, people could follow the money, right? That was really important for transparency's sake. And just to give you an idea of what buckets, because it gets kind of confusing, who does what. And honestly, we're still working through roles and responsibilities. But, you know, to put a broad brushstroke on it, the Austin Transit Partnership is in charge of implementing the Orange Line, the Blue Line, the Downtown Tunnel, the Green Line, which will be the future commuter service from downtown to Colony Park, and the infrastructure and facilities that go along with those. And then Capital Metro still operates the Metro Rapid Service, the Metro Express, the neighborhood circulators, called Pickup, Customer Technology, and the Red Line. And then the City of Austin's domain is the anti-displacement investments. So that's being handled by the city's Housing and Planning Department, the utilities relocation, permitting, and right-of-way. And that at least as a high level overview of what our roles and responsibilities are.
Can I
This
ask
is a
one
tip.
quick
Oh, I'm
question?
sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Can I
of
just ask one
course.
quick question?
Sure.
Does that mean the city is paying for utilities relocations versus money coming from the sales tax that voters approved?
That is a question I do not know the answer to, David. I'm sorry, but I can certainly find out, and I'm going to write it down in my notebook so I can get that back to you. Who pays for the utility?
Right. What pot of money, et cetera.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. This is a slide that I hate from a visual perspective. I'm sorry, there's so much. This is not best practices, but it is a list of all the stuff that's happened. And it's worth seeing all in one page because it just gives you an idea of how much is being done. So some of the highlights, we had the budget approved for the Project Connect program in February of 2021. Also we established the ATP board and approved bylaws and officers in March of 2021. Our Expo and Pleasant Valley Metro Rapid lines were approved. They got what's called the categorical exclusion. This is for the environmental process, which is sort of a fast forward into project development by the FTA. That was in May. And they also in May had completed to 30% design on those two Metro Rapid lines. Let's see, we launched a Pflugerville pickup zone in March of 2021 and a Dessau pickup zone in June 2021. The Expo and Pleasant Valley routes progressed into the FTA Small Starts Readiness Program in June. We launched the South Menchaca pickup zone in July, the North Oak Hill pickup zone in August. We've started the electric bus procurement program. And again, some of this is overlap with Capital Metro, but that began in September and is ongoing. Let's see, the Joint Powers Agreement was codified in the fall of 2021 and double tracking for the red line. These are the enhancements to the red line that were part of the Project Connect program. We broke ground on that in the fall. And Expo and Pleasant Valley FTA letters of prejudice. I don't even know what that is, so I shouldn't even say it, but it's a thing, apparently. It's a milestone.
Jackie, letters of no
Yeah.
prejudice, that allows us to start, construction and spending money, and we'll be able to reimburse by the grant at the time we do get the grant agreement.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm
Yes,
so glad
it's
you
just
were on the agenda tonight.
Yes, but it's a big deal
Appreciate
for
that.
us that we can start getting
Yay.
reimbursed.
Awesome, thanks. And then really exciting, we started to break ground on some projects. So we had a groundbreaking for the Expo line and one for our Broadmoor station. And so things are really starting to happen. Very exciting to see these things come to fruition so quickly. Oops. On the horizon, for the orange and blue lines, we're moving towards 30% design. We expect that milestone to be reached this summer. Another milestone that we're going to reach is the draft environmental impact statement. And we expect a record of decision, also known as the ROD. We love our acronyms. We expect that record of decision from the Federal Transit Administration on our environmental review, winter of 2022 or early 2023, and expect to have entry into project engineering, the clearance for that in summer of 2023, and a full funding grant agreement, hopefully in fall of 2024. And then with the Metro Rapids, we had our groundbreakings for those two lines. Menchaca's anticipated construction start is June of 2022. The Gold Line anticipated construction start is January of 2023. And then for the Red Line, McCullough Station is anticipated to begin construction in May of 2022. And our central maintenance facility design will happen in 2022 with an end. Oops. Sorry about that. Anticipation construction start in 2023 and or 2024, probably late 2023, early 2024. And of course, the electric vehicle procurement is ongoing. I don't know if I need to go through these Metro Rapid lines, but we'll talk a little bit more about Metro Rapid. And I know that Catherine is going to talk more in depth about those projects. So I think I'll just
I'll cover that all.
skip forward. And just a reminder about the orange line, that it is the north-south transit line. It provides high-capacity service. It operates along the existing Metro Rapid 801 route, and the funding was from the initial light rail investment would deliver transit service from North Lamar Transit Center to Stasny Lane, and it includes 21 stations with service approximately every 10 minutes or less. And the blue line, as a reminder, connects Republic Square to downtown Austin to the Austin Bergstrom or AUS Airport. It provides high capacity service again, operates along portions of the existing Metrobus Route 20 with 10 stations and service approximately every 10 minutes or less. And just, I wanted to show the timeline of where we are with the orange and blue lines. We are still really early in the process. And I just want to emphasize that we have ongoing community engagement and involvement. We are always open to feedback. We have a feedback email, feedback@projectconnect.com, and always open to coming and giving updates to, of course, committees like ours, but also neighborhood groups and civic organizations. Shoot, we've even done updates in people's living rooms for smaller organizations. So we are open and available. I mentioned in the summer, we're achieving 2 major milestones. One is the 30% design mark and the draft environmental impact statement. And so we are right between that scoping and that milestone this summer. And then you can see how it all flows from there. All the way down to the grand opening, which we expect to be somewhere around 2029, fingers crossed. A little bit about community engagement. We've done quite a bit, and it's been a challenge. Like the chair was saying, it's not ideal to engage on such highly technical and like on the ground kind of projects in a virtual setting. But we've done the best we can, and now we're starting to supplement with our at-stop outreach and block walking and all the things that make the difference in connecting people to information, because we realize that most people do not engage with us at our meetings. I will say that the virtual meeting is probably going to stay in our toolbox, and the reason is that we have gotten so much more participation, like triple the amount of participation that we had when we were doing meetings in person. It's just much more convenient for a lot of people. So likely to stay as a major part of our engagement effort. But we still are missing people. We're still missing people who don't have time, frankly, to engage with us on our terms, who are not digitally connected or digitally comfortable. And so we, little by little, will start adding back as many in-person opportunities, but likely those in-person opportunities are going to be focused on what we call our priority communities. And those are the people who need our services the most. And so again, with the accessibility presentation, it's about solving for those who need it most. And if you do that, then you solve for everyone. And so that's what we'll focus our in-person engagement on. Also taking the chair's note and comment about the importance of being able to visualize, especially when we're talking about nitty-gritty projects in a particular area, being able to host working group meetings in the locations where we are discussing projects is going to be key as we move forward and are more comfortable gathering larger groups of people. We did get some questions. Edna mentioned to me that there have been questions about our property owner outreach process, and I know that this is a super sensitive subject. It is, frankly, the hardest part of our job as community engagement team. is learning how to do the engagement that involves property acquisition or potential property impacts. And right now in this stage of the game, we are still in potential. And so nothing is certain yet. But that being said, even at 15% design, we recognize that we really needed to get out and start talking to people who we saw some potential for impacts to their property. And so what we did was we divided the list of properties abutting the project corridors on the orange and blue line into those with potential for high impact. In other words, a full property take or a big enough property take that it will impact significantly a business operation in that property. And we began by sending notification letters to those properties in July of last summer, and then followed that up in August with scheduling meetings to introduce people, because a lot of people didn't even know this was happening. Amazingly, I really didn't know. And so, just starting with what the heck is this? What are we talking about? Why are we doing it? Starting from scratch. And developing a cadence of meetings with these property owners, depending on how much potential impact there is, and also how much they need information from us. Some were very plugged in and are very plugged in, and they know about the project. They were like, yeah, well, you don't need to tell me this. I know. Let's get cut to the chase. And some, like I mentioned, we had to start from the beginning. The second level, yes.
I'm sorry. So, yeah, what we discussed at an earlier meeting isn't just the property owners, but the businesses
Yes.
who may not own the property, but obviously they're also impacted. So I just want to make sure that
yes,
you're also talking about business owners when you talk about property here. I hope.
We are. And, it's a complicated. It's kind of like a catch-22. And I stepped in it big time because I started doing some block walking back in June along the businesses in the 29th Street, North Guadalupe area, where, as you know, there's going to be a lot of impact. And I went to visit El Patio and talked to the manager there. Well, lo and behold, the El Patio is the business, but it's the property owner is somebody different. And so, yes, that blew up in my face real fast. And so it's kind of a delicate dance. We want to reach out to the property owner first if we can, and then we talk to the business owner. So we're learning as we go. And, we have reached out to other transit systems. We had a sort of a workshop call with Valley Metro in Phoenix, who most recently has been going through this type of property impact situation to get their best practices and, touching base with other, groups just to make sure we know what we're doing and we're being respectful of people. And that was one area that we learned our lesson. So yes, the business owners as well. We just have to make sure that the property owner is notified before we reach out to the business.
Okay.
The second group was potential for moderate impact. And these are sometimes impacts to, say, an awning or signage of a property. Sometimes it's a few parking spaces, but it will have some impact on businesses' operations. And so that's considered our second level. And we started sending those notification letters out in October. A lot of these are still being scheduled. So it takes a while to get through these. I mean, especially on the orange line, my goodness, there are so many properties along the corridor. It's a 21-mile stretch. And so it'll be a while before we are able to connect with all of these properties, but we're continuing to follow up on ones that we don't hear from because we can't let that go for too long. And then finally, for the properties with minimal impact potential. So maybe it's just a sliver here or there, and just working out how we acquire, connecting with that property owner, letting them know that we may need to acquire a very small piece of their property, and explaining what that means to them. And so that's basically been our process. Again, we're learning as we go. We're learning lessons, sometimes the hard way. But, you know, we always are open to feedback on how we can make that better. And then finally, just wanted to mention that we've got a bunch of engagement opportunities coming up. So tomorrow, Betsy mentioned, we have the North Guadalupe Working Group at 5:30. You can sign up for that at the projectconnect.com website at Get Involved. I'm sure I'll see a couple of you there, or we'll see a couple of you there. And then on the 12th, we have that Saturday morning, the second ATP Governance Town Hall that's being put on by the Eno Transportation Institute. And this is an independent organization that studies transportation. And they'll provide us with a recommendation and a report on how we move forward with governance, because it's a sticky wicket, you know. And then on the 23rd, we have an encore community design workshop for the drag. We had some students reach out to us and say, hey, we were studying for finals that day and we just couldn't come. Can we do another one? And so we are doing another one, and anybody is welcome to attend. I believe it is also listed on our Project Connect website if you want to register for that. March 1st, we have a Meet the Team event, and this is for CSAC, Access, and our ATP committees to get to know the ATP team so that you know who's doing what, and you know who to complain to or ask a question of. We're going to be holding that at Plaza Saltillo. I believe it's going to be from 4:30 to 6:30, but you'll be getting an invitation. I believe you already received a save the date from Edna today. And then March 29th and 31st, we're going to be doing a couple of community, virtual community meetings called Let's Talk Project Connect. And this idea came up because, first of all, there was going to be too long of a stretch between now and the 30% design community outreach. And we don't like to leave our community hanging. We want to keep, you know, a cadence of communication going. And at all of our previous meetings over the last year, we've gotten a number of questions, and, you know, certain topics continue to rise to the top. One of them is traffic and traffic flow and the drag, for example. People want to know, okay, well, if there's going to be this transit mall option, where the heck are the cars going to go and how are we going to handle that? And so traffic is going to be one topic that we will provide a breakout session on so people can really dig into that topic and ask a bunch of questions, because we feel like there hasn't been the time to devote to these subjects. Another breakout session is going to be the environmental review and environmental topics. Another is going to be connectivity, whether it be bike connectivity, pedestrian connectivity, wheelchair, or maybe just how do the Cap Metro bus services, what's the plan to connect those into these light rail lines? So that connectivity group. And then finally, the City of Austin Housing and Planning is going to be hosting a fourth breakout group on the anti-displacement strategies. And so we think there'll be a lot of interest in all of those topics, and hope you all can join us. The March 29th meeting will be in the evening, and then we're going to offer the March 31st meeting in the noon hour. And there's one more community design workshop that's going to be coming up this spring. We haven't set the date just yet, but that will be for Crestview area, which is another really hairy area where a lot of services and conflicts are coming together in one place, and takes a lot of partners to figure this one out. So looking forward to that interesting discussion.